mynews.studio.
In just 1 year, Mackenzie Scott gave away enough money to buy a fleet of satellites. Yet, most of the organizations she supports only find out they've been selected at the very last minute.
Let's put this in context. Today is January 23, 2026. Back in December, she announced $7.1 billion in donations. That's the largest single-year gift by any individual in recent memory, right?
Yes, that's right. And if you look at the pattern, it's a sharp increase. $2.6 billion in 2024, $2.1 billion in 2023. Altogether, since 2019, she's distributed $26.3 billion.
That's remarkable, and almost without precedent. But there's something else here, her method. What makes her approach stand out compared to, say, the Gates Foundation or other big philanthropic organizations?
The key difference is how open-ended her donations are. She typically gives around $5 million per organization, and there aren't any restrictions. So nonprofits can decide for themselves how best to use the money, instead of being tied to a specific project or a donor's agenda.
So no stacks of paperwork, no quarterly updates, no earmarking every dollar?
Exactly. And she doesn't maintain a public-facing foundation or even an office. In many cases, organizations only find out they've received funding because an intermediary reaches out. Often it comes entirely out of the blue.
That's a big departure from how traditional philanthropy usually works, with layers of oversight and a lot of process. So why keep things so behind the scenes?
Scott says she trusts the judgment of the people actually running these organizations. In her words, teams with experience on the front lines will know best how to put the money to good use. So she's really prioritizing their expertise.
Is there any data on who's actually getting these gifts? I mean, which types of organizations benefit?
There is. The Center for Effective Philanthropy found that she's given to more than 2,000 nonprofits. What stands out is how transformative the funding can be, especially for mid-sized groups. Things like hiring staff, expanding programs, or even starting an endowment.
Do we have examples of that kind of impact?
Yes, definitely. Since 2020, Scott has given $1.35 billion to historically black colleges and universities, or HBCUs. In 2025 alone, $783 million went to schools like Norfolk State, Prairie View A&M, Bowie State, and Lincoln University. These gifts have broadened educational opportunities and helped stabilize these institutions through difficult times.
That's a significant amount of trust being placed in these organizations. Have we seen other big donors follow her lead?
There's more interest in her model these days. Some major donors are starting to try trust-based, faster funding with fewer restrictions. But for now, most still use the traditional model. Applications, progress reports, all of that.
And what about criticism? Does her approach raise any concerns?
It does. Some critics worry that by reducing oversight, there's less accountability. There's also the argument that since intermediaries choose recipients without much transparency, it might push nonprofits to align with Scott's values instead of broader public interests. And there's a bigger debate whether billionaire philanthropy can start to replace public decision-making, bypassing democratic processes.
So, with less tracking and reporting, is it harder to really know what her giving achieves over time?
That's the trade-off. There's transparency in that she publishes essays and lists of gifts. But there's less formal accountability than you'd see with big foundations that require regular updates. It's still an open question whether this approach is sustainable.
Why is her story important on a global level? It's not just about writing a few big checks, right?
Exactly. Her model could change how nonprofits operate. Unrestricted, rapid funding lets them respond quickly to urgent needs and try new ideas. It's a new precedent for using private wealth to tackle global challenges. But it also brings up hard questions. Should philanthropy take the lead, or should government? Who gets to decide what matters most? And how do we ensure real accountability?
So in the end, are we relying on fast-moving private money to solve big problems? Or should the focus be on reforming public systems? That's it.
Scott's giving shows what's possible when resources are freed up, but it also highlights the limits and risks of depending on individual donors for social change.
To sum up, Mackenzie Scott's $7.1 billion in donations is pushing philanthropy in new directions, challenging old habits, and raising new questions about trust, accountability, and what the future of giving could look like.
Which brings us back to where we started. If a single person can have this much impact with one decision, what's next for philanthropy? And who gets to make those calls?
Thanks for listening. This episode was powered by mynews.studio. You can try it now for free.